On November 30th, 1984, the body of Deborah Wilson, a 21-year-old mathematics major, was found under the stairwell outside of a computer lab at Drexel University in Philadelphia. She had no purse, backpack, or any other identifying items. Her clothes were intact and she showed no signs of sexual assault, but she had many cuts and bruises covering her face and foam coming from her mouth. The most prominent details of the scene were that she had a deep purple mark on her neck from fatal strangulation, and she had also been missing her socks and white Reebok sneakers. Drexel University is intertwined with the greater metropolitan area of Philly, so as such it is often populated with students and outsiders alike. With this being the case, police soon realized that their search for the suspect would be much of Philadelphia, rather than just the school campus. Luckily, the police were soon thrown an information bone, a young man by the name of Kurt Rayner. Kurt had made his way to the active crime scene and claimed to be the boyfriend of the woman, and even identified her before police could. Right off the bat, the police were skeptical of this young man who seemingly had known so much about the murder scene as it lay. They pulled him aside to take as much information as they could. They soon learned that the deceased Deborah Wilson had been working on her project inside the computer lab that previous night. Mr. Rayner had been with her that night keeping her company while she worked late on an academic project. Eventually, around 1:30 in the morning, Kurt was too tired to stay with Debbie. He reluctantly asked if he could leave early to get some sleep, and Debbie agreed, already being used to working late to finish her work anyways. Upon leaving the computer lab and heading back to his dorm, Kurt said he walked past a campus security guard and informed him of Debbie's presence in the lab, asking if the man could check up on her when he had the chance, just to make sure she was safe. The very next morning, Kurt woke up to talk of a woman's body being found on campus. He didn't put much thought into it, though when he discovered Debbie's car still parked in the same place as it was the night before, and she did not meet up with him in their arranged rendezvous spot, Mr. Rayner knew exactly who that dead woman was. Right away, the police suspected foul play on Kurt's part. They noticed bruising on his knuckles, though he said it was only from punching a wall because of the anger and guilt he felt upon learning that his girlfriend had been killed while he was asleep. The detectives also thought it strangely convenient that Kurt just so happened to leave Debbie by herself shortly before she was killed. To avoid tipping him off to the idea that he was now the primary suspect, police told Kurt to leave for now, and they would follow up with him later. Upon learning that Debbie was last seen in the computer lab, detectives investigated the room and made note of a computer with Debbie's account still logged in and left on overnight. In the middle of typing a sentence, last updated that morning at 1:30. Police had then noticed the lab was cleaned of any forensic evidence by an unaware janitor who seemed very apologetic and remorseful after learning that he had just accidentally cleaned up the murder scene of a young woman. In the sadistically brighter contrast, investigators did find 2 extension cords with patterns matching the ones across Debbie's neck, and a spot of blood on the back of the chair that was stationed at her computer. These items were sent off to a forensics lab shortly after, and so the police used their downtime to investigate their several leads. Upon following up with Kurt, police couldn't find anything incriminating him, but did want to confirm his alibi anyways. Officers tracked down the security guard that Kurt spoke with in the early morning hours of November 30th. The guard's name was Bryce Clapman, and he corroborated Kurt's story. Upon speaking to Kurt, Bryce radioed his fellow coworkers David Dixon and Bronson Ziegler about the girl, Debbie, who was still inside the computer lab, informing them both that someone would need to go check on her at some point throughout their night shift. Ziegler did not feel like going to check on her, so he stated he told Dixon to go do it instead. Although later in an interview, Dixon claimed he was never told to go check on her by his coworkers, or that she was even present in the building, he still said he was aware of someone being inside the computer lab at around 2:15 in the morning, claiming he heard the printer making noises around that time and saw lights were still on inside. He told detectives that he returned about 2 hours later and saw the lights were off and the doors were locked, and assumed that whoever was working in the lab must have finally finished up their work, and one of his coworkers had locked the door after she left. Ziegler was interviewed and showed hostility to the situation, reportedly refusing a lie detector test after claiming the investigators were messing with him, and then sarcastically responding to the allegations that he did in fact murder Deborah Wilson. Though, police could not accept this as an admission of guilt and ultimately went to their next key suspect. Upon speaking to Debbie's friends and acquaintances, investigators learned of a stalker, a man by the name of Alan, who was apparently obsessed with Debbie. Debbie had rejected Alan's romantic advances just one day before her death and had been seen by her friends attempting to get Alan away from her. When officers spoke to Alan, he was cooperative and said he did not kill Debbie, though he did not have an alibi either, telling investigators he was just by himself all night in his apartment when Debbie was killed. He was not taken into custody because of a lack of physical evidence, just like the rest of the suspects. The detectives finally saw revival in the case when they got results back from the forensics lab about the blood found on Debbie's computer chair. They were able to identify the blood type as type A, whereas Debbie's was type O. With this, the police gathered all their primary suspects and tested them for blood type. Amazingly, none of the suspects had type A blood. As the law's last hope at finding a killer crumbled before their eyes, Debbie's murder had most surprisingly gone cold. It wasn't until 1992, 8 years later, that Deborah Wilson's case would be picked back up. The Vidocq Society is an elite group of criminologists, lawyers, detectives, and the like. They dedicate their time to helping solve cold case murders across the country. They would eventually show interest in Debbie's case, opening it back up with one largely overlooked detail: Debbie's socks and white Reebok sneakers. They were missing for a reason. Their suspect had a foot fetish. Detectives went back to Drexel to interview everyone again, and upon speaking with the computer lab manager, they had learned another crucial detail that was previously overlooked. The manager said it had always bothered him how the security guard David Dixon recalled the sounds of printers working inside the computer lab around 2 in the morning, when the manager knew for a fact that the printers always turned off automatically at 10 p.m. Officers dug deep into David Dixon's past and discovered that when he was in the Army in 1979, he had gotten into some trouble for stealing a female soldier's shoes. More specifically, white Reebok sneakers. Intrigued and clearly onto something stronger than any other piece of evidence they had received in 8 long years, detectives began speaking to Dixon's neighbors. Most of the women they interviewed mentioned having their white sneakers and dirty socks stolen when they were left outside, but never really losing anything else. Dixon's apartment was subject to a police raid, where they discovered a box with 20 pairs of women's white sneakers and old dirty socks. Also discovered was over 70 homemade videos of nothing but shots of women's feet, all wearing white sneakers. These videos were presumably used as pornographic trophies. In June of 1993, Dixon was arrested and put into a cell with an informant. The informant stated that when he was alone in the cell with Dixon, he confessed to the murder of 21-year-old Deborah Wilson. On November 30th, 1984, he was ultimately sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. In July of 2025, after 33 years in prison, David Dixon was released under an apparent wrongful conviction due to the informant supposedly lying about the encounter. To this present day, Dixon is a free man.